7 years ago, I decided to travel alone through Asia. I was young, independent, and hungry for adventure. I'd already crossed off a few countries, and Bangkok was supposed to be my second-to-last stop before heading home. I remember feeling confident, maybe too confident. I had learned how to navigate busy streets, bargain at markets, and trust my instincts. Or at least I thought I had. One warm evening, while wandering through a crowded street market filled with neon lights, sizzling food stalls, and music blasting from every direction, I met him. He stood out immediately. Tall, European, effortlessly attractive. He smiled like someone who knew exactly how charming he was. We made eye contact, exchanged a few jokes, and within minutes he asked if I'd like to join him for dinner. Normally I would have said no, but something about him felt safe, familiar. He told me he lived in the US, not far from where I was from, and that he was also traveling solo. He laughed easily, spoke confidently, and seemed genuinely interested in me. Against my better judgment, I agreed. That night felt like something out of a movie. He took me to an upscale restaurant with city views and later to one of the most exclusive clubs in Bangkok. Everything was vibrant, exciting, unreal. I remember thinking how lucky I was, to be young, free, and living this life. At the end of the night, he called us a taxi. I was exhausted but happy. As we sat in the back seat, he handed me a bottle of water, smiling casually. I didn't hesitate. I drank it. That's the last clear memory I have. When I woke up, everything was wrong. I was lying on a hard floor in total silence. The air was cold and stale. There were no windows, no clocks, no phone. Just a single dim light hanging from the ceiling. Panic hit me all at once. I jumped up, my heart pounding, and started screaming. I banged on the walls until my hands hurt. No one answered. Eventually a door opened. A man stepped inside. But it wasn't the man I'd gone to dinner with. This one was tall, thin, and expressionless. He placed food and water on the floor and stood there silently. Asked where I was. I asked about the man from the market. He didn't respond. He turned around and left, locking the door behind him. I ate the food because I didn't know when I'd be fed again. Hours later, or maybe days. I couldn't tell anymore. Several men entered the room. They surrounded me, speaking to each other in a language I didn't understand. They examined me like I wasn't human. They checked my teeth, shined lights in my eyes, searched every part of my body. I was frozen in fear, unable to fight or scream. Then they left. After that, the silence became unbearable. Time lost all meaning. I didn't know if it was day or night. Sometimes no one came at all. Other times, food appeared without explanation. I cried constantly. I blamed myself for trusting a stranger. I wondered if I was going to die there, alone, without anyone knowing what happened to me. The room started playing tricks on my mind. I thought I saw people who weren't there. I dreamed of my family, only to wake up in the darkness again. I felt myself slipping, losing pieces of who I was. Then one day, the thin man returned, but this time he only brought water. I drank it, and once again my world went black. I thought waking up in that basement was the worst thing that could happen to me. But when I opened my eyes again, I realized the real nightmare was only just beginning. When I woke up again, I wasn't on the cold floor anymore. I was lying in the softest bed I had ever felt, wrapped in silk sheets that shimmered under warm lighting. For a brief, horrifying second, I wondered if I had died. The room was massive. High ceilings, polished floors, priceless-looking artwork lining the walls. A fireplace stood unused but elegant, like something from a historical palace. Then I saw him. A man was sitting in a chair across the room, calmly watching me. I screamed. I jumped out of the bed and ran for the door, pulling at the handle with all my strength. I spun around, scanning the walls, the windows. There were none. My chest tightened as panic surged through me. The man didn't move. He just observed me like I was an interesting experiment. I shouted at him. I told him people were looking for me. I threatened police, embassies, anything I could think of. My voice cracked as I realized how powerless I was. That's when he stood up. He spoke in broken English, slowly, as if explaining something simple to a child. He told me I had been purchased, not kidnapped, purchased. He said it casually, like it was a normal business transaction. According to him, I now worked for him. He explained that I was to be a maid in his household. I would cook, clean, and serve. In return, I would have food, shelter, and my own room. He claimed he had paid a very large sum for me and that I should feel fortunate. Felt sick. He gestured around the room and said I was free to use the kitchen, walk the property, and socialize with the other girls later that day. Other girls. The words echoed in my head. Before I could ask more, he calmly added that disobedience was not recommended. I didn't need him to explain what that meant. Later that day I met them. There were 5 other women living in the mansion, all dressed neatly, all moving with eerie precision. They smiled constantly. Too constantly. They served him with flawless manners, never speaking unless spoken to. When I tried to catch their eyes, most of them avoided my gaze. That night, I cried in my private room until my throat hurt. Over the next few days, I tried talking to the other girls when we were alone. I whispered questions. I asked if they wanted to escape. Their responses terrified me more than silence ever could. They told me they were happy. They said this man had saved them, that he gave them purpose, that they were grateful. Either they were lying, or they had been broken completely. The days blurred into weeks. I learned the routines quickly. Everything had to be perfect. The floors had to shine. Meals had to be served exactly on time. Every movement was measured. Every mistake felt dangerous. Fear kept me obedient. Eventually, I noticed something unsettling. The man began requesting me more than the others. He asked me to serve his meals personally, wash his clothes, clean his private rooms. I could feel his eyes on me often, studying me. I didn't know why he favored me, and I didn't want to. One evening he called me into his library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled the room. He told me to dust them. As I worked, I felt his presence behind me. Watching, judging. He picked up a book and asked if I had read it. When I shook my head, he handed it to me and told me I should. This confused me. Reading was forbidden for the maids. No TV, no music, no distractions. This felt like a test. I accepted the book silently. From that day on, my responsibilities increased. I was allowed into his private study, an off-limits room no other maid could enter. He trusted me. Or worse, he thought he owned me completely. Months passed. A year went by. I became his favorite. The other girls grew resentful. I could hear them whispering about me when they thought I couldn't hear. But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't know I was watching. They didn't know I was waiting. Because hidden behind my silence, I was searching for a way out, and I was closer than any of them realized. I thought surviving meant staying invisible. Until one small mistake led me to something that could either save my life, or get me killed instantly. Being his favorite was a double-edged sword. On the surface, it looked like privilege. I was trusted with more responsibility, given access to rooms no one else could enter, and allowed slightly more freedom within the mansion. But underneath it all, I knew the truth. His attention made me a target. One wrong move, one suspicious glance, and everything could end. The other maids avoided me now. Their smiles felt strained, forced. I could hear them whispering in corners, their voices low and sharp. I didn't blame them. Favoritism was dangerous in that house. It bred jealousy, resentment, and fear. I kept my head down and did my work perfectly. Then one night everything changed. I was cleaning the man's private study, a room filled with dark wood furniture, important-looking documents, and expensive decor. I moved carefully, wiping surfaces exactly as I had been taught. When I opened a desk drawer to dust inside, I froze. There was a phone, a modern smartphone, tucked neatly in the back of the drawer. My heart slammed against my ribs. Phones were forbidden. None of the maids were allowed near technology. This had to be his personal device, something he assumed no one would ever touch. For a moment I thought it was a test. My hands trembled as I slowly closed the drawer, pretending I hadn't seen anything. That night I barely slept. I replayed the moment over and over, wondering if I had imagined it. The next day, when I returned to clean the study, I checked again. The phone was still there. Same drawer. Same position. For several days, I repeated the same routine. I looked, confirmed it was real, and left it untouched. I needed to be sure. If this was a trap, I couldn't afford to fall into it. On the 5th day, I made my decision. I opened the drawer and picked up the phone. There was no passcode. I felt a rush of panic and hope collide inside me. My fingers hovered over the screen as I debated what to do. I didn't know how much time I had. I didn't know if someone was watching. The signal was terrible. Only one bar, flickering in and out. I paced around the room, lifting the phone higher, standing on my toes, praying for something stronger. Nothing. Then I climbed onto the desk. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure it could be heard outside the room. Finally the signal stabilized. Just barely. I scrolled through the contacts, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I found a number based in the United States and pressed call. The ringing felt endless. I was convinced no one would answer. Then I heard a voice. "Hello." I nearly collapsed with relief. I whispered at first, terrified of being overheard. They asked who I was. I told them my name, and then everything poured out. The man from the street market. The drugged water. The basement. The inspections. The mansion. I begged them to help me. They asked for my location. I couldn't give them an address. I didn't know one. All I could say was that it was a massive mansion in Thailand, owned by a powerful man who seemed untouchable. I asked if they could trace the call. I pleaded with them not to give up on me. They promised they would try everything. Before hanging up, I begged them not to call the phone back. If anyone found out, I wouldn't survive the consequences. I placed the phone back exactly where I found it. Just as I shut the drawer, I heard footsteps. My blood ran cold. I jumped down from the desk and grabbed my cleaning cloth, wiping the surface like nothing had happened. The door creaked open. He stepped inside. He looked at me and smiled. I forced my own smile, every muscle in my face screaming. He didn't say anything. He just watched me work for a moment longer than usual before leaving the room. That night I didn't sleep at all. The next morning the mansion felt different. Too quiet. Too still. Every sound made me flinch. Every glance from him felt sharper, more calculating. Did he know? Had he seen something? I moved through my tasks like a machine, terrified that help might never come. Or worse, that it already had. And I'd be punished before it arrived. I had finally asked for help, but waiting for rescue turned out to be just as terrifying as being trapped, because every single day felt like it could be my last. After the phone call, time slowed in the most painful way imaginable. Every hour stretched endlessly. Every footstep echoed too loudly. I kept expecting someone to grab me, to accuse me, to drag me back into that windowless room where everything had begun. But nothing happened, and somehow that was worse. The mansion continued to operate like a perfectly programmed machine. The other maids followed their routines without question. Their movements were synchronized. Their expressions empty. If they felt fear, they hid it better than I ever could. I wondered how long they had been there, how much of themselves they had lost. Sometimes I wanted to scream at them, to shake them and tell them freedom still existed. But I knew better. One wrong word could cost all of us everything. Barely slept. When I did, nightmares woke me up gasping for air. I dreamt of police sirens that turned into laughter. Of open doors that slammed shut right before I reached them. I woke each morning exhausted, forcing myself to move, to smile, to survive. Became obsessively careful. I cleaned slower, more deliberately. I made sure every fork was aligned perfectly, every surface spotless. When I passed him in the hall, I lowered my eyes. When he spoke, I responded calmly. I couldn't let him see fear. Fear was weakness. Still, his attention felt heavier. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me from across the room, his expression unreadable. Other times he would stand too close, asking meaningless questions just to observe my reactions. Each interaction felt like a test I didn't know I was taking. Whenever I could, I checked the phone. The signal never improved, just a single bar that flickered like it might disappear at any moment. I sent short messages whenever possible. Still here. Same location. Please don't forget me. Then I erased everything and returned the phone to its hiding place. Days passed. Then weeks. No sirens. No rescue. Doubt crept in. What if they couldn't find me? What if he found out first? What if help never came at all? I started preparing myself mentally for the possibility that this was my life now. That I would grow old in that house, serving quietly until there was nothing left of me. And then something changed. One morning, the mansion was unnaturally silent. No footsteps, no instructions, no orders being barked by his staff. Even the other maids seemed tense, exchanging brief glances but saying nothing. My chest tightened with dread. I continued working, trying not to draw attention to myself when I heard it. Sirens. At first I thought I was imagining it. I froze, holding my breath. Then I heard them again, louder this time. Multiple vehicles. Shouting. The unmistakable sound of urgency. I rushed to a window near the front of the mansion and peeked through the curtains. Flashing lights filled the driveway. My knees nearly gave out. Uniformed officers were entering the property. Alongside them were people dressed differently. More official, more serious. Later I would learn they were representatives from the U.S. Embassy. Chaos erupted. The man was furious. He shouted, gestured wildly, arguing with the officials. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught fragments: how we were employees, how he paid us, how there was no crime. Lies wrapped in confidence. An officer quietly approached me while the argument continued. He didn't grab me. He didn't raise his voice. He simply met my eyes and nodded. It was time. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might collapse. I followed him carefully, terrified that at any second someone would stop us. As we passed the man, his eyes locked onto mine. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was betrayal. That image is burned into my memory. They guided me into a vehicle and drove me away from the mansion. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly. Everything happened fast after that. I was taken straight to the airport under protection. I boarded a plane bound for the United States, still in shock, barely processing what was happening. As the plane lifted off, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Oh. But even as I stared out the window, freedom came with a heavy weight, because I knew I was leaving others behind. I thought escaping the mansion meant the nightmare was over. But freedom brought its own battles. Ones I never expected to fight. When the plane landed in the United States, I expected to feel instant relief. Instead, I felt numb. As I walked through the airport, surrounded by people laughing, rushing, complaining about delayed flights, it felt unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life. Everything was loud, bright, and normal. Too normal. Officials met me at the gate and escorted me to a secure location. They spoke gently, carefully, explaining that I was safe now and that I could rest before answering any questions. I nodded, but my mind lagged behind their words. Safety was a concept I didn't fully trust yet. That night, I slept in a real bed again, but I barely slept at all. Every sound jolted me awake. I kept expecting the door to lock from the outside. I kept reaching for a phone that I was finally allowed to have, only to remember I didn't need to hide it anymore. Freedom felt fragile, like something that could be taken back if I relaxed too much. In the days that followed, I spoke with investigators, counselors, and embassy officials. They asked me to recount everything, from the street market to the mansion. Saying it out loud made it feel heavier, more real. I had to pause often, fighting waves of nausea and panic as memories surfaced. They told me the man had been detained for questioning, that his wealth and influence wouldn't protect him this time. I wanted to believe them, But part of me still feared his reach. Fear doesn't disappear just because the danger does. Reuniting with my family was overwhelming. When I saw them waiting for me, I froze. For so long, I had survived by shutting down my emotions. Letting them back in felt terrifying. But the moment my mother wrapped her arms around me, something inside me broke open. I cried harder than I ever had before. Being home didn't mean being healed. Simple things triggered me. Crowded places made my chest tighten. Sudden noises sent my heart racing. I couldn't sleep with the lights off. I struggled with guilt, especially when I thought about the other maids still trapped in that house. I asked about them constantly. The officials told me investigations were ongoing, that they were doing everything they could. I clung to those words, hoping they were true. I also made a difficult decision. I chose to keep my story private. I didn't want headlines or interviews. I didn't want strangers dissecting my trauma. I needed space to rebuild myself without becoming a spectacle. With the help of legal advisors, I managed to stay out of the news. Healing was slow. Some days were good. Others felt impossible. I worked with therapists who helped me understand that survival came at a cost, and that the reactions I had weren't weaknesses but scars. Over time, I learned how to breathe again, how to trust again, how to live in the present without constantly scanning for danger. I still think about Thailand, about the mansion, the silence, the women who smiled like they were already gone. I don't know what happened to all of them, but I hope, more than anything, that they found their way out too. 7 years have passed now. Every day feels like a gift I almost lost. I don't travel the same way anymore. I don't trust easily. But I'm alive. I'm free. And I refuse to let what happened define me forever. This is my story, not for fear but for awareness. Because sometimes, danger doesn't look like a threat. Sometimes it smiles and offers you a drink. I survived, but many don't. If this story made you uncomfortable, that's the point. Because the scariest nightmares don't end when the doors finally open.